The President of the United States said two things today. First, he said the war against Iran is very complete, pretty much. Then, at a separate event on the same day, he said, "We haven't won enough." Those two statements were made by the same person, holding the same office, commanding the same military, fighting the same war, within hours of each other. The war is pretty much complete. We haven't won enough. Pick one. Because both cannot be true at the same time. And when you look at what actually happened on Day 13 of Operation Epic Fury, neither statement holds up against reality. Let's start with pretty much complete. If the war is pretty much complete, why did Israel announce a brand new, extensive wave of strikes on Tehran today? Not a continuation of existing operations. A new wave. Why did CENTCOM confirm that 6,000 targets have been struck in 13 days and counting? Why is the Israeli defense minister publicly stating that operations will continue without any time limit as long as required until we achieve all objectives? No time limit, no defined endpoint. Those are not the words of a military campaign that is pretty much complete. Those are the words of an open-ended war with no exit strategy. If the war is pretty much complete, why did Iran's new supreme leader issue his first public statement today demanding that every military base hosting American forces in the region must close or attacks will continue? Mojtaba Khamenei did not say, "We are considering negotiations." He did not say, "We are exploring diplomatic channels." He said, "Close your bases or we keep attacking." That is the opening position of a man who just inherited command of the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East, a network of proxy forces across 4 countries, and a military establishment that has spent 45 years preparing for exactly this war. A leader issuing maximalist demands on Day 13 is not a leader who considers this war pretty much complete. He considers it barely started. If the war is pretty much complete, why did Iranian forces attack targets in 6 different countries in the last 24 hours? An Iranian ballistic missile hit the northern Israeli town of Zarzir, wounding 58 people. A separate missile landed a few hundred meters from the Western Wall, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, close enough that Israel suspended all prayer at every holy site in the city. Nearly 50 drones entered Saudi airspace targeting the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, oil infrastructure, and a base hosting American troops. A drone struck a residential building in Kuwait, wounding 2 civilians. Fuel tanks near Bahrain International Airport were destroyed by fire. A drone damaged fuel tanks at the port of Salalah in Oman. 6 French soldiers were wounded, and 1 killed by a drone strike at a base in Iraqi Kurdistan, the first NATO combat fatality of this war. An Iranian drone struck an Italian base in Erbil. 6 countries attacked in one day. A NATO soldier dead. International airports targeted. Oil infrastructure burning. Holy sites closed. That is not what pretty much complete looks like. That is what escalation looks like. Now let's examine, we haven't won enough. What does winning look like? Because by every measurable military metric, the United States and Israel have inflicted catastrophic damage on Iran. 6,000 targets destroyed. More than 1,200 Iranians killed according to Iranian Health Ministry figures. Over 90 Iranian naval vessels damaged or destroyed, including more than 30 mine-laying ships. The IRGC's missile unit operations commander within Hezbollah, Abu Dar Mohammadi, killed in Beirut. Basij paramilitary checkpoints bombed in Tehran itself. Iran's previous Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei assassinated on February 28th in the strike that started this entire war. Historical cultural sites in Isfahan, buildings that survived 6 centuries, damaged by precision munitions. If 6,000 strikes, 1,200 dead, 90 ships destroyed, proxy commanders assassinated, and the Supreme Leader killed does not constitute winning enough, what does? What is the benchmark? What is the number of strikes that equals enough? What is the number of dead that satisfies the criteria? The president has not defined what victory means. He has not stated a specific military objective that, once achieved, ends the campaign. He has said unconditional surrender in one breath and pretty much complete in the next and haven't won enough in the third. 3 different framings of the same war from the same commander-in-chief on the same day. And here is why that incoherence matters beyond politics. The Pentagon admitted today that it significantly underestimated Iran's willingness to close the Strait of Hormuz when planning Operation Epic Fury. Significantly underestimated. That is the United States Department of Defense publicly acknowledging that its war planning was based on a flawed assumption about how the enemy would respond. The planners assumed Iran would absorb strikes and negotiate. Iran absorbed strikes and closed the most important oil shipping lane on Earth instead. 21% of global daily oil consumption transits the Strait of Hormuz. That waterway is now effectively shut down. Oil prices have surged from $65 per barrel before the war to over $100 per barrel today. The International Energy Agency has called this the largest supply disruption in oil market history, larger than 1973, larger than 1979, larger than 1990, the largest ever. Fuel shortages and rationing have already begun in parts of Asia. Iraq has suspended all oil terminal operations after Iranian forces set 2 tankers on fire off its coast. The IRGC has explicitly threatened to set the region's oil and gas infrastructure on fire if Iranian energy facilities continue to be attacked. The global economy is absorbing a 53% oil price increase in 13 days, and the president says the war is pretty much complete. Complete for whom? Not for the shipping companies whose tankers are burning in the Persian Gulf, not for Asian economies rationing fuel, not for Kuwait, where a drone hit a residential building and knocked out 6 electricity transmission lines, not for the workers at Kuwait International Airport, which was struck by an Iranian drone and sustained material damage. An international civilian airport in a neutral country was bombed. That is not completion. That is expansion. Trump also warned Iran against disrupting global energy supplies. That warning was issued on day 13 of a war that has already caused the worst energy supply disruption in recorded history. The warning is 13 days late. The disruption is already happening. The tankers are already on fire. The mines are already in the water. The strait is already closed. Warning someone not to do something they have already done and continue to do is not strategy. It is acknowledgement that the original strategy failed to prevent exactly the scenario the planners said was unlikely. Meanwhile, the contradictions are multiplying inside every capital involved in this war. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations stated today that Iran will not close the Strait of Hormuz. The new Supreme Leader Khamenei stated the strait would remain closed as a tool of pressure. Same government, same day. Opposite statements. Iranian President Pezeshkian publicly laid out peace terms, recognition of Iran's rights, reparations, security guarantees, and used the word peace while his country is being bombed. The IRGC simultaneously threatened to burn the region's energy infrastructure to the ground. Iran's political leadership is signaling de-escalation. Iran's military leadership is signaling total war. 2 governments inside one country, each issuing orders that contradict the other, and nobody knows which one actually controls the missiles. America's contradictions are just as dangerous. The war is complete, but not won enough. Iran must surrender unconditionally, but we're already winning. The Strait of Hormuz closure was underestimated, but we know what we're doing. Trump lifted sanctions on Russian oil this week to offset the Hormuz disruption. The practical effect is that Russia now sells oil freely on global markets at $100 per barrel, while the war that Russia is quietly supporting keeps Middle Eastern oil off those same markets. Russia is providing Iran with intelligence on U.S. military positions, according to American officials. Russian warships are conducting live-fire missile exercises in the Barents Sea, timed to coincide with NATO's cold response exercise in Scandinavia, during the exact 72 hours that a French NATO soldier was killed and an Italian NATO base was struck by Iranian forces. Russia is profiting from this war, feeding intelligence to one side, running naval provocations against the other side, and collecting windfall energy revenues from the chaos. And the United States just made that easier by lifting Russian oil sanctions. The human cost continues to climb while leaders debate whether the war is complete or not complete enough. 7 American soldiers are dead, 8 are seriously wounded. 4 U.S. aircraft have been lost, including a KC-135 Stratotanker that crashed in western Iraq. 14 Israeli soldiers have been wounded since the war began. 179 Israeli civilians were injured in the last 24 hours alone. Over 570 people have been killed in Lebanon. At least 27 Iraqi PMF fighters killed by U.S. airstrikes. One French soldier dead. Workers injured in drone strikes on Dubai. A container ship hit by an unknown projectile near Jebel Ali. 3 million people displaced in Iran. 800,000 displaced in Lebanon. Historical cultural sites in Isfahan are damaged. The Rashk Palace, Chehel Sotun, Ali Kapu Palace. Structures that survived Mongol invasions and 2 world wars, now scarred by 21st century bombs. Every damaged tile, every shattered window becomes propaganda fuel that will recruit fighters for decades after this war ends. Hezbollah fired 200 rockets into Israel overnight, the largest single barrage of the war, coordinated simultaneously with an Iranian ballistic missile salvo. A joint operation between the IRGC and Hezbollah, the most integrated combined military action these two forces have ever conducted. Israel responded with massive strikes on Beirut's Dahiya district, killing dozens of Hezbollah operatives and issuing evacuation orders for Lebanon's capital. The IDF has pushed 40 kilometers into southern Lebanon and ordered residents north of the Zerani River to evacuate. That is not a border security operation. That is a territorial advance into a sovereign country. And in the middle of all of this, the President of the United States stands in front of cameras and says the war is very complete, pretty much. Then walks to another podium and says, "We haven't won enough." Then calls for Iran's unconditional surrender. Then acknowledges his own Pentagon underestimated the enemy's response. Then lifts sanctions on Russian oil to compensate for consequences his own war created. Then warns Iran not to disrupt energy supplies that are already disrupted. Then describes defeating Iran's evil empire as a priority that takes precedence over oil prices, while oil prices are the single most immediate impact this war is having on every economy on Earth. The UN Secretary General is calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities. The International Maritime Organization is convening an emergency session. China is condemning the use of force. Colombia is warning against unilateral regime change. NATO's Secretary General says Europe is supportive. And no one, not a single government, not a single diplomat, not a single military commander on either side has presented a credible path from where we are today to a ceasefire that both sides will honor. Day 13 is ending. Day 14 begins in hours. The war is pretty much complete, and it hasn't been won enough. Both statements are from the Commander-in-Chief. Both were said today, and both tell you the same thing. Nobody in charge knows how this ends.